Every single human civilization that has ever existed, without a single documented exception, developed some form of belief in gods, spirits, or a higher power. Not most civilizations. Not the ones we happen to have written records for. Everyone. Isolated tribes in the Amazon who had no contact with the outside world for thousands of years. Ancient societies on opposite sides of the planet who never knew the other existed. Hunter-gatherers, farmers, empires. Every single culture arrived independently at the same basic idea. There is something more than what we can see, and that raises a genuinely fascinating question. Why? Why would a species evolve to believe in something it cannot prove, cannot touch, and cannot directly observe? The answer isn't really about religion at all. It's about how the human brain is built, and it might be one of the most revealing things we know about ourselves. Let's start with something surprisingly simple. Your brain is, at its core, a pattern detection machine. For most of human history, detecting patterns quickly was the difference between living and dying. If you heard a rustle in the grass, your ancestors who assumed it might be a predator and reacted immediately survived at higher rates than the ones who assumed it was probably just the wind and investigated calmly. This created something researchers call agency detection. Your brain is wired to assume that unexplained events have a cause, and specifically that they have an intentional cause. Something did this on purpose. This bias is so deeply built into us that it fires constantly, even today. You yell at your car when it won't start. You feel like the universe is against you when 3 bad things happen in 1 week. You talk to your laptop like it's choosing to be slow just to annoy you. None of that is rational, and you probably know it isn't rational while you're doing it. But the instinct to assign intention to random events is so old and so deeply wired that it happens automatically, whether or not you actually believe your car has feelings. Now scale that instinct up to everything ancient humans couldn't explain. Why did the rain stop this year? Why did that person die suddenly with no visible injury? Why did the volcano erupt? Why did lightning strike that specific tree? Ancient humans didn't have meteorology, geology, or germ theory. What they had was an incredibly powerful pattern-detecting brain that insisted on a very deep instinctual level that these events must have been caused by something. And if the cause was invisible, the logical next step for that brain was to assume the cause was simply hidden. Not absent, hidden. Something with intention, something like a person, but bigger, more powerful, and operating just beyond what human eyes could see. This wasn't ancient humans being naive or foolish. This was ancient humans doing exactly what their brains had evolved to do for hundreds of thousands of years, explaining the unexplainable through intention, because assuming intention had kept their ancestors alive. There's a second piece to this that's just as important, and it has to do with death. Every animal that is aware enough to understand danger eventually becomes aware, in some form, of its own mortality. But humans are unusual in the depth of that awareness. We don't just recognize that death is a danger to avoid, we understand with full clarity that it is guaranteed, that it is coming for every single person we love and for us. This is called mortality salience, and it is a psychologically enormous burden for a species to carry. Most animals don't spend their lives dwelling on the eventual certainty of their own non-existence. Humans do, and a mind capable of imagining the future, planning ahead, and understanding cause and effect at the level humans can, is also a mind capable of imagining its own ending in vivid, terrifying detail. That is an immense amount of existential weight to carry around every single day, while still trying to hunt, gather food, raise children, and function normally. Belief systems that propose an afterlife, a soul, or a continuation beyond physical death offer something psychologically vital, relief, a sense that this overwhelming fact of non-existence is not actually the final word. Researchers who study this, working from what's called terror management theory, have found that when people are reminded of their own mortality, they consistently reach for belief systems, cultural values, and symbolic meaning more strongly. It's not weakness. It's a documented, repeatable psychological pattern. The fear of ending is one of the heaviest things a conscious mind can carry, and belief in something beyond it is one of the oldest tools humans developed to carry that weight. But there's a third factor, and this one might be the most important of all, because it's not about fear or explanation. It's about survival through cooperation. Humans are an extraordinarily social species. We didn't survive by being the strongest or fastest animal in the environment. We survived by cooperating in large groups, coordinating hunts, sharing food, defending territory together, and trusting people we weren't directly related to. But here's the problem with large-scale cooperation. It only works if people actually follow the rules, even when nobody is watching them. A small tribe of 30 people can enforce good behavior through direct social pressure. Everyone knows everyone. Everyone sees what everyone else does. But once human groups grew larger, once strangers had to trust strangers, once entire cities and civilizations needed people to cooperate who would never personally meet, direct social monitoring stopped being enough. You cannot watch everyone all the time. This is where belief in an all-seeing, all-knowing higher power becomes remarkably useful from a purely functional standpoint. If people believe that something is always watching, always judging, and will eventually hold them accountable, even for actions no human witnessed, they are far more likely to behave cooperatively even when no one else is around. Researchers studying the evolution of large-scale cooperation have proposed that societies with strong belief in moralizing, all-seeing gods, were able to grow larger, trust strangers more easily, and outcompete societies without that belief system. In other words, belief in a watching, judging higher power may have functioned as one of the earliest and most effective tools for enabling human civilization to scale beyond small tribal groups into the large, complex societies we live in today. Not because ancient humans consciously calculated this, but because groups that happened to develop this belief cooperated better, and cooperation is one of the single greatest survival advantages a species can have. So when you put all of this together, agency detection insisting that unexplained events have intentional causes, the psychological weight of mortality demanding some form of relief and meaning, and large-scale cooperation requiring a sense of accountability beyond direct social observation, you start to see why belief in gods appears in essentially every human civilization that has ever existed. It wasn't one single cause. It was multiple deep, independent pressures all pointing in the exact same direction at once. Explain the unexplainable. Cope with the unbearable. Cooperate with the unwatchable. 3 enormous human problems, and belief systems addressed all 3 simultaneously. None of this proves or disproves whether any specific belief is true. That's a different question entirely, and it's not one psychology or anthropology can answer. What this does show is why the instinct to believe in something greater than ourselves shows up in humans so reliably, so universally, and so early in our history, regardless of geography, regardless of isolation, regardless of whether one culture ever made contact with another. The instinct runs deeper than any single religion, any single culture, or any single era. It runs all the way down to how the human brain is built to detect patterns, cope with mortality, and hold large groups of strangers together long enough to build something greater than any one person could build alone. Ancient humans weren't inventing something arbitrary when they looked at the world and sensed something more behind it. They were responding in the most human way possible to the same 3 pressures every one of us still quietly carries today.